Hello and welcome to Wise Exotics. I'm your host Trevor, and today we'll be discussing the dark side of Nepenthes Section 2. Quick word of warning, there is sensitive information here. It is simply being provided so that you and others can come to your own conclusions and make your own rational decisions on various purchases or when researching these plants. So take it as you will. Now that being said, Nepenthes status and or endangerment is derived based on population that is reported. So most new species are auto-labeled into critically endangered because they have an initial population that you can only check very quickly and photograph and try to document. That's not to say there aren't more of them on the other side of the hill or further up. It's just what they could quickly take a photo of and or record data on type of thing. There is a new Nepenthes kampalili, found on Mount Kampalili in eastern Mindanao, Philippines. Now, that's Kamplili. That being said, if you see anybody selling seeds or cuttings of this, it's more likely a scam, fake, or a poacher. So just stay away from it. Don't rock the boat. Don't try to get involved. Let it settle for about a year to two. That's typical of most new species and how they start getting into the trade through the research cuttings and or samples provided from those who actually did it and or have them put the clones out into the trade. So it is actually labeled under the category of villosa, though it has been reported to be very similar to peltata and villosa. It also has its own interesting traits. So keep that in mind, and there is some interesting articles if you'd like to go read those. Now, that being said, there's also a lot of misinformation or things being mislabeled that can also cause problems. One example is clipeata. So within clipeata, there are some fake clipeata. I know that sounds interesting to say. How do you fake a clipeata? That were pushed during the hot sale time when the fires and poaching started decimating their population in the wild. There were a couple of conniving people who pushed out clipeata x Eymae into the trade as pure clipeata. Now, thankfully, a lot of these have been re-verified and genetically tested, thankfully. So you're more likely to get a pure clipeata now, but during that time, if you purchase one, you might actually have a hybrid. And it was something that was done just to get on the bandwagon and make a profit. So things happen, but it's just something that should be aware. Now, that being said, clipeata themselves have several stable populations along cliff faces and or locations that are basically inaccessible to people without heavy helicopters and drones holding you up so you can try, because quite frankly the cliff faces are very brittle, and if you try to climb it yourself you will fall to your death, per people I know who have found these populations and have reported them. Now, there are some people who've reported some of the populations gone from certain areas and we're screaming that the species is extinct. No, that's not true. Just because you haven't been to the other locations doesn't mean it's gone. Yes, the location you're at probably is. If it was easily accessible from a hike, like a lot of people have been doing, it's more likely gone. And that has been reported in various ways. But to just say the entire species is extinct because you didn't want to go further, kind of weird, in my opinion, because other documentations have been done to the contrary. Now, that being said, there's some other misinformation, like with villosa. Reported recently, after several people have went there, to the location of villosa, a lot of people really like to push that villosa needs extreme humidity. That's not the case. Villosa can actually handle down to 60s in the wild, if not maybe a little lower. So if you were worried about having villosa simply because of the humidity level, you don't really have to be. I mean, mine's in a tank that gets 90% humidity, but it drops down quite a bit during the summer. So keep that in mind. There are things you learn if you actually physically go there and or start researching the habitat. Why it was reported that it only and or had to have high humidity could just be a wives' tale type of thing, misinformation, or just something one nursery did and that's the only way they got it to work. It's not they were trying to be malicious. It's just this is the only thing that works for me. Now, growing them in horticulture versus nature can be different, as we all know. Plant in nature grows out of rock. Plant in here is allergic to tap water type of thing. There's a lot of memes and jokes about it, so keep it as well. Now, some interesting information on rigidifolia when I actually started speaking to the cultivators of it. There's a lot of interesting information as well as some things that are kind of suspicious. So I'll let you draw your own conclusions from this. So rigidifolia was once labeled as species number 6 through Malaysian tropics. Now they had 10 clones, and all clones' genders have been verified at this time. Let me repeat that. All the clones in Malaysian tropics have been verified of their gender. The majority of them, 9, are male. 1 is a female, and has been for quite some time apparently. So quite a few of these were produced through tissue culture, but sadly, due to them changing the head of Malaysian tropics and him or her focusing on different aspects and or sales, the propagation of them went down to nothing. So they didn't anymore. And then the whole it becoming near endangered and whatnot hit, so that further reduced the amount of them even wanting to attempt to do the tissue culture. Now, interesting fact: during the tissue culture of plenty of these, a lot of them actually came up as hybrids. They weren't pure rigidifolia. Now, that's not to say of the 10 we spoke of, those ones are supposedly pure. But when they were doing their tissue culture propagation, even from species that looked like pure species in the wild, a lot of them actually gave traits of spectabilis. So either spectabilis, rigidifolia type of thing, or spectabilis x rigidifolia, or various interconnections of that. Now, rigidifolia is known to have natural hybrid with spectabilis. But it is really interesting that even the ones they thought were pure when tissue cultured actually started to become more spectabilis-like. So I wonder if habitat has a application in this as other things. It's not to say that rigidifolia is in its own species, but that when they were trying to tissue culture, they kept running into problems where they kept finding spectabilis x rigidifolia, so they had to start again with a different sample, and or check the other samples and verify they weren't doing it. So it was really an interesting thing to learn about. Now, there are supposedly more populations in the wild, and they are being misreported. This is just what I've been told. And or when looking into it, it seems that there are populations that somehow magically keep finding their way into horticultural trade. It's extinct. Oh no, we found another population. All of a sudden that population's gone and sold out. Oh no, we found another population. And this pattern has been going on and off. So it's kind of like, is it extinct or isn't it? Well, we said it was, and then there's 2,000 in another area that we're not telling you about that we're selling to the black market. It's kind of just for an insane profit. Kind of shady. But I've seen several recent individuals start popping up with young rigidifolia that are not clones. And I know for a fact that several nurseries have already stated that they've got some flowering and are trying to do horticultural trosses to reduce the price, bump up them so they're no longer in the extinct status, at least horticulturally. And as we know, there are females out there, and people are either donating or getting involved with the breeding with the nurseries that have the males to their females and allowing for that. Now, that being said, it's inconclusive, but at this time, it's still in the extinct status. So I hope you're all doing well. And until next time, Trevor.